You'll be shocked by the truth about Jesus' face and skin color. Was Jesus really how we've always pictured him? A letter written by Pontius Pilate to the Roman Emperor Tiberius describes what Jesus really looked like, and even talks about his miracles, trial, crucifixion, and resurrection. These details are not even in the Gospels. Pilate begins his letter by saying, "Greetings, Majesty. What's happening here in Judea is so surprising, I have to report everything. Since I became governor, I've faced constant trouble. The people here are rebellious, and the religious leaders hate Roman rule." Pilate noticed that the Jewish priests were proud and power-hungry. He warned that they could even betray their own for wealth and influence. Then, Pilate started hearing about a man from Galilee named Jesus. At first, he thought Jesus might be stirring up rebellion, but when he heard him speak, he realized that wasn't true. Jesus actually taught peace, kindness, and respect. Once, someone asked Jesus if people should pay taxes to Caesar. Jesus replied, "Give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God." Pilate was amazed. He said Jesus' words were wiser than anything he had ever read from philosophers like Socrates or Plato. He gave Jesus full freedom to speak, teach, and gather crowds. He saw no reason to arrest him. But the religious leaders were angry. Jesus called them out, calling them snakes and beautiful tombs that look good on the outside but are full of death inside. They saw him as a threat to their power. Pilate received daily complaints. Fearing trouble, he called Jesus to meet him. When Jesus arrived, Pilate was stunned. He said, "When I saw him, my body trembled. He stood calm and pure. I felt weak and unworthy in his presence." Pilate told Jesus, "You have powerful enemies. Please be careful with your words. Even Socrates had enemies, and they killed him." Jesus replied, "Your words are not from true wisdom. Everything follows God's law. I tell you, before the rose blooms, the blood of the righteous will be shed." Pilate ended the letter by saying, "I value Jesus' wisdom more than the Pharisees, who use their freedom to lie, plot, and turn the people against Caesar." So what did Pilate really think of Jesus? Not as a criminal, but as a wise and peaceful man, someone who left a deep impact even on a Roman governor's heart. Jesus and the Roman governor, a simplified summary. The Roman governor promised Jesus protection, saying his palace would be a safe place, day and night. But Jesus calmly replied, "When the time comes, there will be no refuge for the Son of Man, only in heaven." The governor, worried, warned Jesus to speak more carefully for safety reasons. Jesus responded gently, "I didn't come to cause trouble, but to bring peace, love, and kindness. Persecution won't be because of me, but I must face it as part of God's will." Jesus left peacefully, which gave the governor some relief, as he felt uneasy in Jesus' presence. King Herod, who ruled nearby and feared Jesus too, secretly joined Jesus' enemies. Though he wanted Jesus gone, he hesitated, not wanting to upset the Roman Senate. Herod later visited the governor and asked about Jesus. The governor said Jesus seemed like a wise man and wasn't a political threat, so Rome didn't see a reason to punish him. Herod left with a mocking smile. As Passover approached, Jerusalem became crowded and tense. A mob demanded Jesus' death. It was discovered that temple money had been used to bribe the crowd. One of the Roman soldiers had been publicly insulted, so the governor asked for more troops, but was denied. Now short on men and surrounded by unrest, the governor had no choice but to let events play out. Jesus was accused of being a rebel. The crowd, supported by leaders, shouted, "Crucify him." Three groups united against Jesus: the Herodians, Sadducees, and Pharisees. They hated Jesus and resented Roman rule. They were also angry about Jesus' criticisms and the idea of using temple money for public projects. Jesus was sent to the high priest and sentenced to death. The priest passed him back to the governor for final approval. The governor tried to pass the case to Herod, but Herod returned it, leaving the full responsibility to the governor. Crowds filled the city. A prophetess warned the governor not to harm Jesus, saying she had visions of him walking on water and commanding storms. She said bad things would happen if he ignored the warnings. Even Rome would be cursed. Jesus was brought back again, and the governor asked the people what crime he had committed. They said he claimed to be the Son of God and the King of the Jews. The governor replied that Roman law did not execute people for such claims. He offered to release a prisoner for Passover and suggested Jesus, but the crowd refused. He reminded them of their own laws, which required a delay, fasting, and a fair review before executing someone. But the crowd kept shouting, "Crucify him." To calm them, the governor had Jesus beaten, hoping that would be enough. But it only made things worse. In the end, he washed his hands in front of the people and said, "I find no fault in him." But the decision had already been forced on him. My words meant nothing. Jesus' fate was already decided. I had seen angry mobs and riots before, but nothing like that day. It felt like all the demons of hell had come to Jerusalem. The crowd moved like a violent storm, shouting louder than anything I had ever heard, even worse than the riots in Pannonia or the Roman Forum. The sky grew dark, like a cold winter evening. It reminded me of the day Julius Caesar died. It was also the Ides of March. I stood quietly in a corner, watching as Jesus, the innocent man from Nazareth, was taken to be killed. The streets were empty, as if the whole city had gone to witness what was happening at Calvary. There was sadness in the air. The Roman centurion tried to control the chaos, but it felt like this was something greater than men, like the gods were involved. From Golgotha, I heard the sound of pain carried by the wind. Black clouds covered the city like a dark blanket. People said the high priest cried out, "Either God is suffering or the universe is falling apart." Then an earthquake shook Lower Egypt, terrifying everyone. A Jewish scholar named Bazar, a friend of Jesus, was found dead. No one knew if it was from fear or grief. That night, I wrapped myself in my cloak and walked toward Golgotha. The crucifixion was over. People were walking home in silence, many filled with guilt and sadness. I saw my Roman soldiers looking shaken. One of them had covered our eagle banner in mourning. I heard whispers of miracles. Some people stared at the hill, waiting for a sign. I returned to the governor's palace with a heavy heart. The stairs still had Jesus' blood on them. There I saw an old man praying, crying among Roman soldiers. He fell at my feet, weeping. His pain broke me, and we cried together. Those who had shouted for Jesus to die were now gone. I heard some had washed their mouths with vinegar, maybe from guilt or fear of what Jesus had said about the resurrection. When I pulled myself together, I asked the old man who he was and what he wanted. "I am Joseph of Arimathea," he said. "I want to bury Jesus." I gave him permission and told my officer Melis to send soldiers to protect the body. A few days later, the tomb was found empty. Jesus' followers claimed he had risen, just as he said he would. That caused even more chaos than his death. I looked into it as best I could. Joseph had used his own tomb, but I don't know if he was part of anything. The next day, a priest came to me, afraid the disciples would steal the body and pretend Jesus had risen. I told the captain of the guard, Marcus, to place enough Jewish soldiers at the tomb. That way, if anything happened, it wouldn't be our fault. Later, when the tomb was found empty, I became very worried. Marcus told me his officer, Ben Isham, had led 100 men to guard it. Isham and his soldiers were terrified by what happened that morning. So, I called for him to explain. He said that around the 4th watch of the night, a soft, beautiful light appeared above the tomb. At first, he thought it was women coming to prepare Jesus' body, but wondered how they got past the guards. As he kept watching, the area lit up completely. He saw many people in burial cloths, looking young and joyful. Heavenly music filled the air, the most beautiful he'd ever heard. It felt like the whole sky was praising God. Suddenly, the ground shook violently. He felt weak and couldn't stay on his feet, then fainted. When he woke up, he was lying face down. I asked if maybe he had confused the light with the sunrise. He said he thought so at first, but it was still too dark, and too early. I asked if he might have gotten dizzy from standing too fast, but he said no, he hadn't slept at all, since sleeping on duty was punishable by death. He let some other soldiers rest, and a few were still asleep. I asked how long it all lasted. He guessed about an hour, until daylight overtook the scene. I asked if he went to the tomb after regaining strength, but he said he didn't, he was too afraid. Once backup came, they all went back to the barracks. The priests questioned him later. They told him to say it was just an earthquake and that the guards had been asleep. They even offered him money to claim Jesus' followers stole the body. But he said he never saw any of them and only heard about the missing body later. When I asked what the priests really thought, he said some believed Jesus wasn't just a regular man or even the son of Mary. They thought he had appeared on earth before, during the times of Abraham and Lot. If that's true, it fits what we know. Jesus seemed to control nature itself. He turned water into wine, healed the sick, raised the dead, calmed storms, and even made fish appear with coins in their mouths. Because of these things, he was both loved and hated. He wasn't arrested for crimes, but for who he was. Thousands saw what he did, supporters and enemies alike. I'm starting to believe, like someone said at the cross, truly, this was the Son of God. Pontius Pilate described Jesus as a calm, peaceful man with an impressive presence. He wasn't very tall, but everyone noticed him. His face showed kindness even in tough situations. His eyes, some said light brown, others said blue, were deep, wise, and full of compassion. His hair was soft, light brown, and fell over his shoulders. His skin was fair and healthy, like someone who spent time outside but was still well-groomed. He had a beautiful, balanced face that made people feel safe. He had a neat beard and dressed simply, always clean, with no jewelry or flashy clothes. He looked humble, but powerful. Without even speaking, he gave off peace and made people feel welcome. Now, noble sovereign, this is the most accurate report I can give. I've told everything honestly so you can judge me fairly, knowing that I've faced much criticism for this. Your loyal and obedient servant.